today is nothing short of historic. The news that 500 Russian-made missiles launched by the Houthis have struck and obliterated Israel's Lod Airport has sent shockwaves across the world. And let me begin by saying this: it is not just a military event. It is a turning point in global politics. When a regional power like Yemen, long considered impoverished and marginal in international affairs, is suddenly able to deliver such a devastating blow to Israel, the most militarized state in the Middle East, heavily backed by the United States, it forces us to stop, reconsider, and ask, what is the world becoming? Think about it. For decades, Israel has built its reputation on unshakable air defenses, on cutting-edge technology like the Iron Dome, and on the idea that its territory was nearly untouchable. Yet today, 500 missiles tore through that illusion and took out a core hub of its transportation, economy, and international connectivity, Lod Airport. Not just a piece of infrastructure, but a symbol of Israeli strength and modernity, has been turned into rubble. And here's the hook I want you to sit with: if Israel's crown jewel of security can fall in a single night, what else can fall? Now, let us ask the deeper economic and geopolitical questions, because these are not simply missiles, they are statements. They reveal that the military balance of power in the region is shifting in ways Washington and Tel Aviv never expected. Why? Because Russia, China, and other global players are fueling a new multipolar world order. For the Houthis to deploy Russian-made missiles on this scale suggests coordination, support, and planning on a level that fundamentally undermines Western dominance. It tells us that U.S. control of Middle Eastern geopolitics is slipping away, one airport, one oil terminal, one strike at a time. And here's another hook. The global markets know this too. Oil prices are already spiking, insurance rates for shipping lanes are soaring, and investors are pulling money out of fragile economies. So when we talk about 500 missiles, we are not only talking about explosions, we are talking about economic tremors that will be felt in New York, in London, in Frankfurt, and yes, in Moscow and Beijing as well. This is the interconnected reality of the 21st century. One missile in Yemen means higher gas prices at the pump in Los Angeles tomorrow morning. Let me also draw your attention to the irony here. For years, Western powers have dismissed Yemen as a backwater devastated by poverty, famine, and internal conflict, and yet, out of that so-called backwater came a strike so sophisticated, so coordinated, that it overwhelmed the very defense systems built with billions of American tax dollars. What does that tell us? It tells us that power is not just about money. It's about will, about alliances, and about the desperation of people who believe they have nothing left to lose. And that is the most dangerous force in history. Now, I must say this clearly: this strike does not mean that Israel is defeated, nor that the Houthis have suddenly become a global superpower. But what it does mean that the myth of Israeli invulnerability, the myth that has justified decades of occupation, expansion, and domination, has been shattered before our eyes. That is what makes this moment historic. It changes the psychology of the Middle East. It emboldens resistance movements across the region, and it sends a chilling message to Israel's leadership: you are no longer untouchable. As we close, I want you to take away this point: history is not made in boardrooms or in polite diplomatic dinners. History is made in explosions like this, when the powerless force the powerful to recognize them, when the forgotten nations suddenly command attention, when the margins become the center of global debate. The obliteration of Lod Airport is not simply about Yemen and Israel. It is about the crumbling of old empires, the rise of new powers, and the uncertain, volatile road ahead. The destruction of Lod Airport at the hands of 500 Russian-made Houthi missiles missiles has done something that no army, no political speech, and no carefully worded diplomatic communique could ever achieve. It shattered the myth of Israeli invincibility. For decades, Israel has built its image on the backbone of technological superiority, on the confidence that its citizens and its allies could place unwavering faith in its air defense systems, most notably the Iron Dome. It was more than just a military apparatus, it was psychological armor. The idea was simple. No matter how many rockets resistance groups launched, Israel could intercept, neutralize, and move on as though the threat never existed. That myth is now in pieces, lying in the rubble of Lod Airport. And this is where the story becomes more than just about missiles and metal. It is about perception, confidence, and the foundations of regional power. When the Iron Dome was first unveiled, it was marketed not only as a technological breakthrough, but also as a guarantee of safety. Israeli officials would proudly claim it intercepted 90% of incoming threats, and Western media amplified this image of perfection. But what happens when a system that is sold to the world as impenetrable suddenly fails against an onslaught too large to contain? What happens when 500 missiles overwhelm a defense system that had been positioned as a protective shield, not only for Israel, but as a symbol of American-backed military superiority? The answer is simple but devastating. Trust collapses. If the Iron Dome could not stop this, what else can it not stop? That is the hook every leader, every military strategist, and every ordinary Israeli citizen is now forced to confront. The damage to Lod Airport was physical, yes. Runways destroyed, terminals reduced to ashes, international flights grounded, the flow of goods and people abruptly halted. But the greater damage was invisible. It was psychological. For the first time in recent memory, the Israeli public and its government were forced to grapple with a new reality. Their shield has cracks, and those cracks can be exploited. Imagine being a citizen who has grown up with the idea that the state is untouchable, that no matter what enemies might do, the army and its technology will ensure safety. And then in a single night, you watch flames rise from the heart of your nation's gateway to the world. It is not just infrastructure falling, it is belief, confidence, and the comfort of certainty. Israel's enemies, of course, will seize on this moment. Hezbollah in Lebanon, resistance factions in Gaza, and even states like Iran are now calculating with fresh eyes. If Lod Airport can fall, then why not Tel Aviv's power stations, Haifa's ports, or other key symbols of economic and political life? The psychological blow goes beyond borders. It resonates throughout the Middle East and beyond. The perception of weakness is often more dangerous than weakness itself because it emboldens adversaries to act in ways they might never have dared before. This is how power shifts. Not always through one decisive battle, but through the slow erosion of certainty and the rise of doubt. Let us not underestimate the symbolic power of this strike. Airports are not merely runways and terminals, they are lifelines of connection. Lod Airport was Israel's link to the outside world, its point of international engagement, its symbol of mobility and modernity. To see it obliterated sends a message that is far louder than the explosion itself. It says, even the beating heart of Israel's global identity can be stopped. That message, repeated across global headlines, across the whispers of foreign capitals, and across the morale of both allies and enemies, is a weapon in its own right. The failure here is not only military but political. Israel's leaders have relied heavily on the image of invulnerability to justify policies, occupations, and actions across the region. When they told their people that the Iron Dome would protect them, it was a political promise as much as a military one. Breaking that promise has consequences. It erodes public faith in leadership. It weakens Israel's bargaining power with allies, and it calls into question the billions of dollars poured into systems that could not prevent this outcome. And here is the hook. The most dangerous moment for any power is not when it is weak, but when the illusion of its strength has been shattered before the eyes of the world. The obliteration of Lod Airport marks such a moment. The myth of unbreakable Israeli defenses has been undone, and myths, once broken, are nearly impossible to repair. Even if Israel rebuilds, even if its allies send billions more in aid, the memory of that night will linger. The night when 500 missiles overwhelmed the shield, when the unthinkable became reality, and when the region realized that the balance of power may not be what it once seemed. That is why this strike is more than an act of war. It is a turning point in how Israel, its allies, and its enemies see the world. The launch of 500 Russian-made missiles by the Houthis is not an isolated act of defiance. It is a clear indicator of the shifting tides in global power. For decades, the Middle East was viewed as a chessboard where Washington held the queen, moving pieces at will and enforcing outcomes through military aid, economic sanctions, and diplomatic pressure. But this attack forces us to confront a new reality, one where power no longer flows in one direction. The use of advanced Russian weaponry in this strike reveals that Yemen is no longer fighting with makeshift rockets or outdated arms. Instead, it is being armed, supplied, and empowered by actors who are invested in dismantling the unipolar world order that the United States and its allies have long dominated. This is not only about missiles in the sky, it is about the architecture of global influence beginning to fracture. Consider the symbolism here. A country like Yemen, long dismissed as impoverished, battered by famine, and weakened by years of conflict, suddenly executes an operation that not only overwhelms Israeli defenses, but also sends ripples through Washington, Brussels, and every Western capital. That is not Yemen acting alone. It is a sign that other powers, Russia most directly and China indirectly, are extending their reach into the Middle East, using proxies and partnerships to reshape the balance of influence. This is the very essence of a multipolar world. No single superpower has the monopoly on coercion, on decision-making, or on dictating the terms of regional politics. And here is the hook. If Yemen can rise from the margins of collapse to the center of global attention through alliances, what does that say about the capacity of other so-called weaker nations when supported by rival powers? The implications are far-reaching. Russia, by supplying such weaponry, is not just selling arms, it is investing in a strategic message to the West. That message is simple: U.S. dominance is no longer uncontested, and anyone who aligns with Moscow or Beijing can challenge the status quo. This is not an isolated moment, but a pattern. We have already seen Russia entrench itself in Syria, China deepen its trade networks across the Gulf, and Iran cultivate a growing influence across resistance movements. The Houthis missile strike is simply the latest, most dramatic expression of a world where regional actors are no longer pawns. They are emerging as knights and rooks capable of reshaping the game. Israel, of course, represents more than a nation in this dynamic. It is a symbol of Western-backed security in the region. For that symbol to be so visibly undermined by weapons linked to Russia is more than an attack on Israel. It is a direct challenge to U.S. credibility. For years, Washington has presented itself as the guarantor of Israeli safety, the cornerstone of Middle Eastern stability, and the final word on matters of war and peace. Yet here, in one devastating night, a U.S.-backed ally was left exposed, humiliated, and vulnerable, not by a great power, but by a resistance group armed with another great power's tools. That reversal is the kind of moment historians will later mark as evidence of global transition. The global economic system does not remain untouched in such transitions. Energy markets are the most sensitive to disruptions, and this attack makes clear that oil routes, shipping lanes, and trade corridors are all now arenas of multipolar contest. Russia and China, eager to weaken Western dominance, will use every such disruption to tighten their grip on energy flows and trade patterns. The United States, struggling to hold on to influence, finds itself not just battling enemies, but also fighting the creeping erosion of its allies' confidence. And here lies another hook. What happens when U.S. allies begin to question whether aligning themselves exclusively with Washington still guarantees safety? That doubt is itself a weapon, and it is already being deployed by rival powers. It is also worth noting the psychological power of seeing Russian-made weapons strike so deep into Israeli territory. For populations across the Middle East, this sends a signal that aligning with Russia or China can provide tangible results against adversaries that once seemed untouchable. For policymakers in Washington, it is a reminder that every dollar invested in maintaining dominance is being matched, countered, and often outmaneuvered by rivals who understand the leverage of alliances. The Houthis use of Russian arms, then, is not just about Yemen's war with Israel. It is about rewriting the rules of international politics in real time. It demonstrates that small nations, when supported by larger global players, can tilt the balance of power and undermine assumptions that once appeared fixed. The monopoly on coercion, once claimed by the United States, is eroding with each missile, each drone, each strike carried out by groups emboldened by alternative patrons. And that is why this event matters far beyond the Middle East. It is a hook into the heart of the global system, showing us that multipolarity is no longer an abstract theory. It is unfolding before our eyes in fire, steel, and shattered illusions. The strike that obliterated Israel's Lod Airport with 500 Houthi-fired Russian-made missiles cannot be measured only in military terms. Its shockwaves are already reverberating through the global economy. What may appear to be a regional conflict in the Middle East instantly transforms into a global financial event, because the world today is so interconnected that no missile falls in isolation. Oil prices are already surging. Shipping insurers are recalculating